I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents. The Pope speaks for the oppressed on the final days in Cuba. We'll hear what American bishops have to say about the country, past and present.
I've been here before that twice for the freeing of the political prisoners. That was in the late 80s. It was much more restricted then. There was always somebody following you at that time.
We hope that Pope Benedict's visit here will produce many fruits, just as the visit of Blessed John Paul II.
Plus, what one school did to raise awareness for childhood cancer.
Due to a lot of really generous sponsors, I was able to raise over $2,800 for St. Baldrick's.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. On the final day of what may be a once-in-a-lifetime trip for Pope Benedict, the Holy Father celebrated Mass for thousands of Cubans. It took place outdoors in Havana's Revolution Square on what appeared to be a beautiful day for those who came to see the Pope. Rome Reports has more.
The Pope was greeted by thousands of Cubans in Havana's Revolution Square, where Benedict XVI celebrated the last Mass of his apostolic visit. As the Pope made his way to the plaza, a Cuban choir welcomed him. The singers wore purple, a color that represents Lent. Cuban bishops also greeted Benedict XVI as he made his way to the altar. During his homily, the Pope said that the need for truth is a natural human desire, a desire that goes hand in hand with authentic freedom.
Il derecho alla libertà religiosa, tanto in sua dimensione individuale come comunitaria, manifesta la unidad de la persona humana, que es ciudadano y creyente a la vez. Legítima también que los creyentes ofrezcan una contribución a la edificación de la sociedad.
The Pope went on to say that Christianity does not impose its values, but rather it gives the opportunity for people to learn the truth. The truth, said the Pope, sets people free. Cuban President Raúl Castro attended the Mass. There, before him, the Pope recognized that improvements have been made, but he urged the government to do more.
Para poder ejercer esta tarea, ha de contar con la esencial libertad religiosa, que consiste en poder proclamar y celebrar la fe también públicamente, llevando el mensaje de amor, reconciliación y paz que Jesús trajo al mundo.
Our Lady of Charity is the patroness of Cuba. Her image was present at the altar as the Pope recognized her 400th anniversary. The Pope also made a point to honor Cuban priest Felix Varela, who died in 1853. As a priest, he encouraged Cubans to think freely and strengthen their spirituality.
El Padre Varela nos presenta el camino para una verdadera transformación social. Formar hombres virtuosos para forjar una nación digna y libre, ya que esa transformación dependerá de la vida espiritual del hombre, pues no hay patria sin virtud.
The Pope concluded by saying that Cuba and the world need change. But this will only happen, said the Pope, if every person has the opportunity to seek truth and reconciliation.
After that Mass, Pope Benedict met for about a half hour with former Cuban President Fidel Castro, who previously met with John Paul II back in 1998, the only other time a pope has visited Cuba. Yesterday, Benedict met with current Cuban President Raúl Castro. According to Vatican spokesman Father Federico Lombardi, the Holy Father discussed the plight of dissidents in Cuba. Lombardi said he did not have specifics on the nature of the talks. The Pope also urged Castro to declare Good Friday a national holiday in Cuba. Fidel Castro made Christmas a national holiday back in 1998 at the request of John Paul. Catholic News Service reports that members of the dissident group, the Ladies in White, were arrested only hours before Pope Benedict's Mass today. The women were planning on attending that Mass. The group had issued an appeal to meet with Pope Benedict during his time in Cuba. The Vatican had announced ahead of the Pope's arrival that he would not be meeting with any dissident groups. The Holy Father did get the opportunity to meet his spiritual godmother in Cuba. Following a private mass on Tuesday, the Pope met with a member of the Sisters of Charity who's been praying for the Holy Father for the last 20 years. According to Catholic News Agency, the sisters have a practice of praying daily for a specific priest. This particular sister was assigned to pray for then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger. The Vatican spokesman says Pope Benedict was quite moved to meet her. Stay tuned. There's more currents ahead. American bishops in Cuba for the Pope's visit share their thoughts on the country. We'll have that and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faublas. Coming up later, it may be a cool way to cut your hair, but it means much more to children fighting cancer. More on that in a bit, but first, a look at the rest of the day's headlines. A group of U.S. bishops, including 2 from the Diocese of Brooklyn, are in Cuba for Pope Benedict's historic trip there. We caught up with them to get their take on what's happening in the country, where it's been and where it's going.
The biggest challenge of the church in Cuba at this time, and indeed in every part of the world, even the United States, is to have the space to be who the church is, to have the freedom of worship and freedom of religion.
We still have people protesting. As you know, the women in white have been protesting and have been arrested, unfortunately. So the effects of the revolution aren't as well as maybe the government thinks. There are problems here still. The socialist system doesn't seem really to work and satisfy people.
The Church of Cuba is a small church, and it's a poor church, but out of its poverty, it wants to accompany the Cuban people and to share with them the leaven of the gospel.
I had been here before that twice for the freeing of the political prisoners. That was in the late 80s. It was much more restricted then. There was always somebody following you at that time. So today it's a little bit freer here in Cuba.
The papal visit has been received by the Cuban people with great joy. And since I've come with many Cubans from Miami, they also share in the joy of their brother and sisters here in Cuba.
I think the visit of the Holy Father has a strong word to give us, a word that is to be heard. You know, sometimes we have a lot of opinions given about everything, and I think we live in a very opinionated time, but I think we need to hear the Vicar of Christ to have a clear vision of what is the power of the gospel, not only to build the human person, every man and every woman, but also to build new societies, new civilizations where love, peace, and justice can triumph.
The papal visit represents a new springtime of hope, a springtime of faith for the people of Cuba, and we hope that Pope Benedict's visit here will produce many fruits, just as the visit of Blessed John Paul II produced fruits after his visit 14 years ago.
There are many changes, and I think the changes are for the best.
And a U.S. Bishops Subcommittee has announced it is donating $3.5 million to aid the church in the Caribbean. The Bishops Subcommittee of the Church in Latin America approved the grant. The money will help the church in Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and the Antilles. In Haiti, funds will go toward rebuilding church structures destroyed in the 2010 earthquake. The bishops have also filed an amicus brief in the Supreme Court to support the federal government in a case against a strict Arizona immigration law. According to Catholic News Agency, the bishops, along with 2 Protestant denominations, filed that brief. They are asking for the courts to adhere to 2 goals of federal immigration law: promoting family unity and protecting human dignity. The Arizona law gives police officers the right to question people if they have reason to believe they are in the U.S. illegally. And the bishops will likely appeal a Massachusetts judge ruling that a federal grant to the Bishops' Conference was unconstitutional. District Court Judge Richard Stearns says the government implicitly endorsed the church's views when it gave the Bishops' Conference a grant to help fight human trafficking. The bishops had made clear that they would not use the money to fund activities at odds with the church's views. Sister Marianne Walsh told Catholic News Agency that the judge's ruling is, quote, another assault on the free exercise clause of the First Amendment. Results are out in a survey commissioned by the Bishop of Trenton, New Jersey, on why some Catholics have left the church. The study commissioned by Bishop David O'Connell surveyed close to 300 non-church-going Catholics in the Diocese of Trenton. In an America Magazine article, the study's co-authors say among the answers they heard, pastors who were not approachable, the need for more transparency, and changing the liberal progressive slant to a more conservative work ethic atmosphere. In their article, the study's authors say they gave Bishop O'Connell their full report and recommendations. Well, the Pontifical Academy for Life has canceled its third annual conference on stem cell research. The Academy made the decision to cancel after controversy arose over participants who support embryonic stem cell research, including the person scheduled to give that keynote address. One member of the Academy told Catholic News Agency that the cancellation came as an enormous relief to many members of the Academy. A bill in Tennessee that protects teachers who talk about flaws in the theory of evolution is a step closer to becoming law. According to the Chattanooga Times Free Press, the bill heads to Governor Bill Haslam's desk after Tennessee's House overwhelmingly approved the measure. Opponents of the bill argue that it is a backdoor attempt to allow discussion of creationism and intelligent design. The bill's main sponsor says the measure is aimed at encouraging students to challenge current scientific thought and theory. A covenant aimed at uniting the worldwide Anglican Communion appears to have failed. According to Religion News Service, the covenant was aimed at setting boundaries for beliefs and practices in the Anglican Communion. A majority of the Anglican dioceses within the Church of England have voted to reject that measure. Disagreements remain in the Anglican Communion over whether to accept same-sex unions or bishops who are homosexual. And the collections from Pope Benedict's Holy Thursday Mass will go toward Caritas Syria. The Vatican news agency Fides reports the money will be used to help victims of war in Syria. Fides reports that more than 20,000 refugees have crossed the Syrian border into Lebanon. Stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. Coming up, it's back to Cuba, where we will hear more from Bishop DiMarzio.
Cuban people that after 50 years of communism, socialism, have been only since the Holy Father was here the last time, John Paul II, that they open up and that people could even practice their faith openly.
Welcome back. Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is among a group of bishops in Cuba for Pope Benedict's historic visit there. Our Antonina Jelinska had a chance to speak with the bishop for more on his thoughts on the country and the papal events happening over the last 3 days.
Well, it's not my first time here. Coming back, things seem to be a little better. You still see the same old cars, but there is a little bit of a uplift. I think there's a little more entrepreneurial things happening, ability to buy and sell a bit more than there was. The last time I was here for the last papal visit, and that's almost 16 years ago. So there's a slow progress probably towards some kind of a regularization of the situation. Oh, yesterday was a beautiful Mass. I don't know what they estimated the crowd at. I'd say there was several 100,000 people. There's no question about that. At least 200,000 for sure. And the town of 500,000, so that might have been most of the people coming out that can come. It was mostly young people. And the Holy Father celebrated the Mass with all the Cuban bishops. We had about 30 foreign bishops were there also, about 10 of us, 11 from the U.S. It was an interesting celebration. It was at night. It was 5:30. It started a little bit late. It rained towards the end, and Raul Castro was there. Stayed for the whole Mass, and the message was about the Annunciation. We couldn't hear that well, so we had to read it off the internet. Actually, there was no microphones feeding back to where we were sitting, so we're straining to get some words here and there. But it was a good message. I think it was a difference of people that were Catholic and practicing. Certainly the people from outside were sitting in the front. They knew the responses. People in the back, many, I would think, unchurched people. So it was a mixed reaction. It wasn't the kind of enthusiasm I've seen in the past. But it was hard to judge what was happening because it was really far back. You know, there was kind of narrow in the front and way back, so it was hard to tell what was happening. I'm happy to be here again. I have a lot of feeling for Cuba, and I wanted to come back to be with the Holy Father here at this time, to be with some of the Cuban people that are coming back here from Miami, few from our own diocese, Bishop Cisneros, who's Cuban-born. It's an opportunity again to reaffirm our faith in the possibility of change in this country for the better. Well, there's a lot of relationships. Certainly Catholic Relief Services here, they have many projects that they're funding, so they're helping the Caritas Cubana to be able to do some good work here. And also there's other helps that are happening. Bishop Cisneros himself is the president of a foundation that's been raising money to redo the shrine at Cobra, so that's been an important thing too. So there's a lot of relationship. Church of Brooklyn is very multi-ethnic, obviously. Church in Brooklyn is alive and has a lot of freedom. Here the church doesn't have as much freedom. It's Cuban people that after 50 years of communism, socialism, have been only since the Holy Father was here the last time, John Paul II, that they opened up and that people could even practice their faith openly. So it's only about less than 20 years that there's been an openness to practicing the faith. So it's going to take a lot of time for people who don't know anything about the church in many ways to come back to the practice of the faith. Well, let's hope the Holy Father himself, when he came to the airport in Santiago yesterday, hoped that it would continue the progress that has been made between the church and the government. A better collaborative relationship was what he hoped for, and that's what I think was the purpose of his visit, to move things along. The Cuban bishops will meet with the Pope tomorrow or today, probably later today.
And yes?
Well, I'm traveling with the Miami Archdiocese. They have close to 450 people here. Chartered 2 planes from Miami and took us last night from Santiago after the Mass here to Havana, and will take us back home on Thursday morning. Well, it's great. I mean, there's really, most of them are Cuban-born people, some of them Americans. So some of them come back for the first time after 50 years. A very moving relationship for some. One interesting question is that one of the men who really stopped the Miami delegation coming en masse in the last time when John Paul was here, basically had a conversion experience after he saw the Mass celebrated by John Paul. Realized he made a mistake by stopping people from coming because they wanted to have a boat come. That would have been very good. It could have brought, several thousand people. But he stopped it by complaining to the Archbishop and other Cuban leaders. So he's on this trip back for the first time after 50 years. So everything can change.
Stay tuned. There's more Currents ahead. When we return, it's more than just a haircut. We'll find out how these locks of love are helping a good cause.
$1,000 or whatever it is that I personally can donate is not going to be enough to find a cure for cancer, but the more money that people can raise, the better.
And finally tonight, despite the cold temperatures over the last few days, the weather for this time of the year has been unseasonably warm. And as that trend continues, people will try just about anything to keep cool, dressing differently, turning on the air conditioner, taking a swim, and even cutting their hair. Earlier this month, members of the St. John's University community gave people an opportunity to get their hair cut, in some cases taking it all off. But they weren't making any type of fashion statement. It was for a pretty good cause.
Money you raise today will be out and working in scientific institutions around the country and around the world by June 30th this year. There are going to be children that you'll never meet that will be the beneficiaries of your efforts today.
We're setting up and getting ready for our 3rd annual St. John's Locks of Love event. This is the 3rd year we've been doing it, and it's our biggest year yet, and we're getting very excited.
In a few minutes, we're going to be, all of us will be shaving our heads, and then there will also be folks that will be donating 10 inches of their hair as well, so that wigs could be made.
Take it off, take it all off.
We've had 5,300 events in 28 countries and all 50 states. We've shaved 220,000 heads, of which 21,000 amazingly is women. So it's kind of taken out. And to this point, we've raised about $135 million for childhood cancer research.
It's just been really great to see the energy around people saying, hey, I'll do that, I'll raise awareness, I'll wear a button, and I'll do that for children in need.
One of the smartest things the three of us and our board has done is recognize we're not scientists and don't know how to spend the money properly. So we brought in a panel of the most prolific scientists and childhood oncologists to score grant requests for us, and only the best get money for us. The money goes to the best science. We don't play around with it. There's no favoritism. It's all directed by science.
Last year we raised almost $28,000. This year we're at a little over $22,000, and that doesn't include the donations that come in now, so it will definitely be over 30.
Due to a lot of really generous sponsors, I was able to raise over $2,800 for St. Baldrick's. Being a father of one and another one on the way, it's definitely something that's very close to my heart.
Over the summer, my grandma passed away of cancer, and I just thought if after an entire lifetime she's dying at 81 of cancer, I couldn't imagine like the pain that families go through when they lose their children who have barely begun to live. And I just thought if I was going to do it, this is the year for me to do it.
This is my first time cutting my hair more than an inch. Giving up something that I hold so dearly. My hair was my most favorite thing about me. My father's actually a survivor of cancer, and I know 2 children with cancer, and we do this event every year, and it just always hits home. So it was just a lot of emotions. So happy, sad, scared, nervous, apprehensive, excited, everything.
I knew there was no going back once I raised the first dollar, and I've had enough time to be nervous about it. Today was a lot of nerves, but mostly excitement.
I feel great. I feel a lot cooler. I feel a little breeze, but I feel really good, really good.
I know that $1,000 or whatever it is that I personally can donate is not going to be enough to find a cure for cancer, but the more money that people can raise, the better.
The best case scenario is we find a cure and we shut the foundation down. I mean, this foundation was set up to shut down.
This is what's great about St. John's University, just the number of people that want to give back in some way.
I'm a graduate of St. John's University, class of 1987. Think about that for a second. The school that taught you, and it's all about service, comes up with an idea, you know, to bring my favorite charity to the school, and I get to be a guest here and speak at it. It's an amazing feeling.
And that is all for this edition of Currents. Coming up tomorrow, a final roundup of Pope Benedict in Cuba. Plus, need a reason to believe in Catholic education? An academy in Midwood has the answer. Until then, be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. We are also on Facebook and Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for watching and have a good night.